Stop. Put the trowel down. Every time you clean up your garden, you may be destroying your own free pest control team. You're spending money on pesticides just to kill the exact insects trying to protect your vegetables. But today, that cycle stops. In just 10 minutes, you are going to know which 6 weeds to leave, where to put them, and how they're already running a zero-spray pest control system right inside your garden. This is not about nutrition. It is not about soil. It is about behavior. These weeds are actively working right now. And really, that is the part most people never hear. Which weed, if you leave just 2 or 3 clumps near your vegetable bed, may reduce aphids by up to 100% without a single drop of spray? That answer is coming later. But first, here is the reality. The United States home pesticide market runs roughly $9 billion a year. Cornell researcher David Pimentel estimated that pesticides killing beneficial insects costs over $500 million a year in lost ecosystem services. So you are paying money to kill the insects that protect your garden, then paying again when the pests come back. The cycle repeats unless you break it. These 6 weeds help break that cycle. They can attract predators, act as pest decoys, and shield your soil at the same time, all for free. These are not random plants. They were ranked on 4 criteria: beneficial insect support, pest decoy ability, soil health, and seasonal stability. No single weed scores highest in every category, but one of them comes very, very close. So let the countdown begin. Number 6 is wood sorrel. You know this one. The little clover-looking plant with heart-shaped leaves and tiny flowers. But what it is actually doing in your garden is far more important than most people realize. Its small flowers are a high-quality nectar source for hoverflies, the insect that looks like a tiny bee but is not a bee at all. And here is why that matters. Hoverfly larvae eat aphids. Research from Cornell, Purdue, and the University of Illinois found that each larva can consume between 100 and 600 aphids in just 2 weeks. That is not a minor effect. That is a silent cleanup crew working in plain sight. Place wood sorrel in a garden corner or along a fence line, and you're essentially building a hoverfly refueling station. Now, number 5. This one is effective, but there's a warning attached to it that you need to hear clearly. Chickweed. This is the weed most gardeners pull first. Soft leaves, low to the ground, loves cool and damp conditions. But the truth is, those same traits are exactly why aphids prefer it over your vegetables. Research from Sweden and Penn State found that when aphids attack chickweed, the plant releases volatile compounds, and ladybugs use those signals to locate the colony. They fly in, they feed, they lay eggs right there. And that is not all. Cornell researchers also found that ladybugs need specific compounds from chickweed's green leaves for successful reproduction. So chickweed is not just a decoy, it is also a signal flare and a support system for one of the most important predators in the garden. But here is the danger. Chickweed can carry cucumber mosaic virus through its seeds, with transmission rates reported between 21 and 40%. That changes how you use it. You do not let it sit unchecked. You use it as a short-term trap plant. And the moment you see yellowing leaves, you pull it. Immediately. That yellowing is your signal. Used properly, chickweed becomes a free aphid trap. Leave it too long, and it can turn into a problem. Now to number 4. This one is a pure sacrifice crop. And honestly, that is exactly what makes it so valuable. Lamb's quarters. Tall, broad leaves, often mistaken for spinach. But what matters is not how it looks. What matters is what it attracts. Flea beetles prefer lamb's quarters over your cabbage, kale, and broccoli. A 2007 Indiana study found that flea beetles appear on lamb's quarters before they reach the main crop. Think about what that means. It is a decoy plant, a sacrifice crop, one you did not even have to plant. It takes the first hit, so your brassicas do not have to. That is not an accident. That is function. But there is one important rule. Trim lamb's quarters every 2 weeks if it is near your main beds. It competes strongly for nutrients, and if you let it go wild, it can start stealing from the crops you are trying to protect. So let it take the hit from the beetles, but do not let it take over the bed. By this point, the pattern should be clear. These weeds are not useless intruders. They're active players. Some attract predators, some lure pests away, some do both. And really, the deeper you look, the harder it becomes to see them the same way again. The top 3 are where things get even more serious, because those plants are not just specialists. They are ecosystem builders. Now here is where things get serious. The top 3 are not specialists. They are ecosystem builders. They do not just solve one problem, they support the whole system. Number 3 is purslane. This is the plant most people pull because it looks messy and spreads everywhere, but really, that reaction misses what it is actually doing. Purslane acts as a living mulch, and that single roll can change the entire disease pressure in a vegetable garden. When purslane covers more than 70% of the soil surface, it can physically block fungal spores from splashing up onto your vegetable leaves. That matters more than most gardeners realize, because so many fungal problems begin when spores move from bare soil to the plant during watering or rain. Purslane interrupts that path. It puts a living barrier between the soil and your crops, and the effect does not stop there. A 2023 study in Nature Scientific Reports confirmed that it physically loosens your soil and massively boosts microbial life. So this is not just a weed spreading across the ground. It is a living, breathing umbrella between your soil and your vegetables. The less bare soil you have, the fewer fungal problems you fight. That is not theory. That is smart, efficient gardening. Now, number 2, one of the most misunderstood plants in any garden, dandelion. I know what many people think the moment they hear that name, but hear this all the way through because the timing is everything. Dandelion flowers earlier in spring than almost anything else in the landscape, and that timing matters more than most gardeners realize. A United Kingdom survey of 65 plant species identified dandelion as one of the top nectar producers. That alone is significant, but the deeper truth is even more important. When early spring nectar is scarce, bee colonies can weaken, and that weakness is linked to colony collapse disorder, which has caused documented population losses in affected colonies. So this is not about one dandelion magically saving your garden. That would be too simple. This is about keeping pollinators alive early in the season so they are still around when your tomatoes and squash need them most. That is the real value. The work begins before your crops even flower. Dandelion helps keep that system alive at the exact moment when the landscape offers very little else. And now, the weed that was promised. The one that may reduce aphids by 70 to 100% without spraying. Here it is. Number 1 is white clover. And really, this is the plant that comes closest to doing everything at once. White clover fixes nitrogen from the air into the soil through a bacteria called rhizobium. Studies report fixation rates between 125 and 150 milligrams of nitrogen per kilogram of soil. But that is only the beginning. White clover simultaneously attracts honeybees for pollination, parasitic wasps that target pest larvae, and ground beetles that hunt slugs and soil pests. That means it is not only feeding the soil, it is also building pollination strength and predator pressure at the same time. One plant, multiple systems, all working together. And the data behind that versatility is hard to ignore. A Swedish meta-analysis found that intercropping with clover may reduce pressure from competing weeds by 82%. That is why white clover stands above the rest. It is the most versatile plant on this list for running a complete system. Nitrogen, pollination, and pest control, all at the same time, all season long, for free. No other plant on this list does all of this at once, so now the full picture is starting to come together. Wood sorrel helps build a hoverfly army. Chickweed acts as a short-term aphid trap, though it must be managed carefully. Lamb's quarters works as a sacrifice crop that draws flea beetles away from cabbage, kale, and broccoli. Purslane shields the soil and helps suppress fungal spread. Dandelion feeds pollinators early before your crops need them. And white clover ties the entire system together through nitrogen, pollination, and predator support. These weeds are not just surviving in your garden, they're performing jobs, quietly, constantly. And in many cases, better than the products people spend money trying to replace them with. One final part remains, because once you see what these 6 plants are actually doing, the way you manage your garden changes completely. Let me bring this together. These 6 weeds are running your pest control, your pollination, and your soil health right now. Every time you pull them, you may be switching that system off. And that is the part most gardeners never stop to think about. The United States home pesticide market is roughly $9 billion a year. That industry works best when you do not know these 6 plants exist, but the truth is much simpler and much more powerful. If you dedicate about 10% of your garden space to the right weeds, you may already have the foundation of a complete IPM system. $0, 0 spraying. The lazy gardener's way, yes, but also the smarter way. The weed that may reduce aphids by 70 to 100% without spraying is wood sorrel because that is where the hoverfly army comes from. But the one weed that does everything, pest control, pollination, and nitrogen support, is white clover. That is the plant that comes closest to running the whole system by itself. And the best part is, you can start right now, not next month. Not after buying supplies, not after spraying one more round, right now. Here's the action for this week. Leave one dandelion or one clover plant near your vegetable bed. Then count how many bees and ladybugs show up in 10 minutes. That number tells you something important. Because the moment you start counting visitors instead of pests, you begin seeing your garden in a completely different way. Really, that shift is everything. Once you stop looking at every wild plant as an enemy, you start noticing function. You start noticing relationships. You start noticing that some of the best workers in your garden were there all along, and you were the one pulling them out. These 6 weeds can attract predators, act as pest decoys, and shield your soil all at the same time, all for free. They are not random plants. They are part of a living system. And once that system is working, you are no longer fighting your garden every week. You're finally letting it help you. If this was useful, leave a comment with what weed is most stubborn in your garden right now, and tell us how many bees or ladybugs you counted near your bed. Like, subscribe, and share your thoughts if you want more practical breakdowns like this. Your feedback helps us make the next one even better.